Hey there, friends. And for my new friends, hello. My name's Nadine Bent Russell. Today, I'm going to be recording my video memoir for NBR Net, a new episode of NBR Net. Um, I can only promise one thing. If you find this information anywhere else, please introduce me to the content creators because I want to connect with some people around this. Um, I felt a recent lesson that I had about honor was worth sharing. Looking at unfolding it to a broader view I hold about it as a concept. One thing I want to say, one would think I was threatening some people's lives when I engage them based on who they are versus who they present or fantasize about being. Many humans spend more time engaging their imaginary selves versus the real work ahead of us, no matter what titles we've achieved. I originally started this post with that paragraph, an infographic with similar words that will probably be attached when this is over, and completely a different angle altogether for the post. Usually, when I write posts, I make them about observations I've had over time of many different people in different regions, and always calculating for what my ability to attract colors, in it. I'm noticing that it's time to share what life has shown me before we get too far headlong into love of ourselves and what we think more than what we seek in a life of honor. I'm noticing that people are taking their personal revelations and making them rules for other people, for everyone else. Probably learned that from church, right? In case I'm offering something else, in this case, I'm offering something else for you to draw on in your life journey, just another idea. I think we need to stop making rules out of everything good. We could have a revelation personally and not try to offer it to someone else, but to maybe inspire them to look for their own solutions that may be similar. Um, Things like cancel culture, race cards, red flags, cyberbullying, and the plethora of other ways that we've learned to dishonor each other seems to pervade society. When was the last time you heard anybody speak about honor? Yeah, not the Christian stuff that I know a lot of my white evangelical friends are recovering from, no matter what your ethnicity or race is. There's a white evangelical version of Christendom that a lot of us have been interacting. I personally never accepted any of that in my own heart, not that. I did accept the spirit of Yeshua HaMashiach. Absolutely. I think I even remember the moment that I met Holy Spirit. But from that moment, I've been following that same spirit right up to today. Though being trained in spiritual warfare, I learned two big lessons: name the demon and know its characteristics. In terms of naming, I did a blog post on saying the names of those worthy of honor, to honor them and keep their spirit present. And I also say that it's important to expose and hold accountable the predators in your midst so they don't get to propagate their evil. I posted a meme that says, there will be no unity without accountability, and there will be no accountability without truth. Those who want to escape accountability are toxic to our democracy and to our society in general. I haven't had to face down an unclean spirit in some time until this morning, but that's a different conversation. But instead of being good at being a walking encyclopedia on demonic names, I've been fortunate enough to learn the characteristics of God, and I'm reliable to distinguish that spirit from the ones that are not so close to God. More, you know, they're more like a cancer to our society and hindering our achieving our best. I'm so thankful for how my concept of God has developed. And recently, my friend Corey mentioned that we are cells in the body of God. And when I heard that, it frankly blew my mind and connected a whole bunch of dots of things that I had been toying with and thinking about and pondering and praying through. And then that went perfectly with the title of my initial sermon that I delivered, graduating from the school of ministry that I attended. It was called God's Hands and Feet. And I noticed that people are each experiencing that feedback loop with that entity I call God, and many other people do too, that is so powerful that God stands outside of time and our human concerns and is in a constant feedback loop of truth with each and every one of us individually. That just always blows my mind. And then I've been blessed to have a really great and full life where I've had achievements that have taken me into very rarefied air all of the time. I've literally turned down many golden opportunities for the upward call of God. In all of those experiences, I can reflect that I was repelled from what was repelled because it was not a good place or a good person. And if dishonor was more present than anything else, I don't have any business with that. Again, unless God says different. But um, I noticed that people build a lot of monuments to revelation instead of going further. It's like you create a little tent city in this idea or this revelation that you had when there's like a whole other journey to be had in new adventures and new revelations. Keep going, keep pressing forward uh, towards the upward call of Christ on your life if you're a believer. Because I'm very comfortable with people of a lot of different practices. I'm just uh, committed to mine. Uh, so many of you don't know what my journey's looked like up to now. More important, from the day that I dropped my clothes in the dirty clothes hamper in my parents' house and went to go and stay with my friend Tamika and her sister here in Union City. My life's never been the same since. Around that time, I decided to tell my teachers the nightmare that I was living at home. And I'll be eternally grateful to Ina Baker and Lynn Gunsmith Nichols at the time. They moved all the levers of school and the municipal systems to save my life. That is not hyperbole. I would have been dead or near dead, but for the path their intervention put me on. I believe Ina and Lynn were two people God used to keep me on my purpose versus a path that would continue to have me be a weather vane, blown this way and that as the winds of my life changed. Because I was taken out of the normal family community construct by a court when I was 16, most have a frame of reference for that family and community construct, but my lessons reflect differently because of my different experience. And at least that's what I gather from a lot of what I see on the media and conversations I'm privy to. Um, so now it's time for this, and I hope you find it helpful. Today, I realize that the space I provide is one of honor. Up to now, I've considered that my possibility that stuck with me since I had a sojourn at Landmark Education in the 90s was who I am. It was like the best phrase I had until I met the phrase honor. Who I am is the possibility of freedom, grace, and miracles for all people. Now that is reflected in that I just learned my name means hope, and my life purpose is honor. Thank you, Pastor Mark Evans. You spoke that to me on a day at the altar, and it's come to fullness today. What is honor? I bet you thought I was going to define it for you. Actually, instead of defining it for you, let me say it's a quality you know when you're engaging it, like many qualities that flow from God. It's something palatable to you. But it's also something that you can search on the internet and kind of look up and see what a lot of different people are saying about what honor is, because that's another way to be inspired for yourself about a definition. I don't can't really vouch for a lot of Christian resources on honor because there's like this situation where, many good things have been mixed with lies and fed back to society. So on Sunday, we'll be addressing the recovery journey many of us are on from the plethora of lies that we've been taught by the church. I'm doing a lot of work deconstructing the system of racism that we all swim in Monday on Wednesday nights, and on an anti-racist group that I moderate and facilitate. And I'm thankful for the space of honor many are enjoying while being held accountable in otherwise known as safe spaces. My friend Tim did a 2-minute clip on why and how he keeps the spaces of his blog and his social media free of bullying and, other kind of toxic environments. I'll be sharing that in the post that I share this video with. So look out for that. Um, the Neely Fuller book that I'm always talking about, that talks about every area of human activity, everywhere that there's a lie of white supremacy and a system of racism hanging out and having a field day, honor doesn't exist. Because the lie of white supremacy doesn't honor the lives of non-white people, Black people. Most of us know that. Do you know that the root of all the isms amounts to dishonor? Whatever people want to say about the Black Lives Matter global movement, it is about the honoring of the lives of Black people in all the humanity that exists as it is. And anyone saying anything else is just veiling their racism, which always wants to stay hidden. They never want to admit that they're racist, and they will always find ways to hide it until it's eradicated once and for all. It is how I see systemic racism playing out in the South still, relegating Black people to only certain levels of achievement, certain tyranny of expectation, low expectations. Um, any person of color that's achieved anything here for the benefit of the people did so against really incredible odds. It's hard to explain. It's just something you probably have to experience. But the lie of white supremacy was developed in response to the inferiority and greed, that feeling in the hearts of too many people. Throwing honor out the window, or as many who faced their families lied, justifying their choices by saying, they're not like us. We don't have to treat them like I treat you. And some of you are knowingly perpetuating that lie just to eke out a little bit of the profit you can until we finally defeat dishonor. Call it whatever you want, depending upon what life shows you. Dishonor always shows up in every single thing we do. I do challenge you to ask me about an area where you don't think that dishonor exists, and I'll show you how it does. For now, I will just provide some examples from the areas outlined by Dr. Fuller, since he's a psychologist and everything about our lives is conveyed through paths of socialization. So all of these areas have been addressed in some common ways in the public discourse. I'm hoping to provide some other aspects of the issues with dishonor and honor. So in the area of economics, that's the first area. Whenever I talk about economics, I always like to share 1 Timothy 6:10. This is the voice version. For the love of money and what it can buy is the root of all sorts of evil. Some already have wandered away from the true faith because they craved what it had to offer. But when reaching for the prize, they found their hands and feet pierced with many sorrows. It is like that. You can, chase the bag if you want to, but really when it comes down to it, chasing the bag is a booby prize. The scripture says that if you seek the kingdom first, all these other things are added. But if you seek that first, I think you're going to get a booby prize. That's what I've been noticing with a lot of people. And then there's another aspect of economics, like how companies treat us. It seems like as if like companies get your money and they want to treat you like a hostage or dishonor your ongoing support of their business. One of the ways is that they keep giving new deals to new customers instead of honoring both your existing customers and your new customers. You really can do both. I really think you can. And then I know of apartment complexes that have like 5 parking spaces right around the office, the rental office, that say like future resident parking. Why couldn't it be current and future resident parking? Because then your current residents feel like they have a place at the office as well. Um, it could happen. You could just designate it for both current and future. And then I don't understand people's seething hatred for rich people because, I mean, I understand if they're keenly aware that becoming wealthy, generally someone's being exploited in your wealth building. But just a general seething hatred for rich people, I think that, if we have an equitable economic system and you become rich, I don't have any qualms about that. But about exploitation, I have to honestly say that I don't respect people who have this idea that they're just going to get really good at the exploitation game because there's money to be made. You know, that person who's like, shoot, the game's going to be played and I'm going to play it. Like, really, people? I don't know what happens when we die, but I'm going to make heaven here. No matter what happens afterward, I'm erring on the side of not hell afterwards by treating people very well here. I don't find the things I've rejected a compelling draw anymore, especially not sitting where I am today. I feel like I'm sitting on a pot of gold, a mountain of riches, of gifts. And so, anyway, another way that dishonor shows up in economics is organized crime. As long as a world, as a society, we keep succumbing to the global system of organized crime, we will never win. Speaking of organized crime, regarding the Don, many people who followed him did so because there's always those who stand behind the bully and cheer. Just like with, professional wrestling, whoever that bad character is, there's those people that get behind that person. And then there's also people behind the Don that just want to be behind the bully because that way they're not a target of the bully. So, we know some of those people as well. But not those who, voted for Biden are all honorable either, though, because there's so many of us who are sitting there going, neener, 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 to the F your feelings crowd. And, we're only a slight bit better than them. I understand being petty can be cathartic. Just don't give it the kind of power I see you giving it like it's real. Remember the humanity of these other people that you're raking across the coals because you won, because we won. I know that Biden is one of the closest actual believers we've had as president, instead of the performative charlatans that have been claiming the mantle of belief. I imagine that's what's been frustrating for a lot of people watching Biden, that, he practices congeniality, collegiality, and the statesmanship that we had come to know in our halls of government. I'm not saying it was all perfect, though. I'm just saying in that regard. So, real change does take time, like the changing of ocean tides, but extrapolated in human experience. So, it takes a bit of patience and it takes a bit of pressing. Patience and pressing at the same time. Sort of like that tension that is talked about. Um, the path of righteousness is a narrow path. Well, there's no more narrow path that I know of than watching Nick Walenda walk across a tightrope. I actually understood that he prays when he walks across those tight ropes on those windy canyons and all those dangerous ways that he does. And I imagine that for us, we need to be prayerful in our narrow path walk as well. So I just thought that was amazing when I learned that he prayed his whole way across. And then, since I touched on organized crime, let me caution everyone against trying to cred up, you know, all these people trying to get credibility so they can choose a team like a gang to like gang up on your adversaries, the ones that you're supposed to be against for whatever reason. Like, let's try to find ways to honor differences without being dishonorable. I'll touch on this again when I talk about politics. But about education, I think this topic's been exhausted. Education is something that we've been talking about reforming and improving for many years. And I'll suffice it to say that we need to teach civics, music, art, and such, critical thinking at every level of education. I think that education should also honor the gifts that are in a student and to make the system one that allows for all learning styles and passions to be incubated. No more prepping workers alone, you know, that we could have workers and we can have innovators and we can have a lot of different kinds of people and passions expressed through education. Undermining education has only undermined society's ability to do great things. So far, we've been doing half of what we could do when we bar some women from work and allow all people of color to be barred from their passions and goals. In entertainment, which is another area that a lot of people have been doing a lot of work in, especially right now, we're seeing a lot of different kinds of content creators and filmmakers and different actors and a lot of different scenes. I'm not going to shout any particular shows out, but you guys know. And they just need to be implemented. These ideas, just like in education, they just need to be implemented. And what I used to call death and destruction news is part of programming that hinders us. All these car crashes and exposes that we see, instead of actually um, bringing a fair and balanced kind of approach that has good news and some bad news and some things that we need to attend to as a society. I also want to say, in terms of media, there's really nothing wrong with Facebook or any other social media. There's something wrong with us. Yeah, yeah, that's just the truth. Because what happens is Facebook is a forum for a bunch of people because most of us have unresolved childhood experiences and there's no sort of moderator. That was a problem waiting to happen. And then avoiding the obstacle course of your healing is holding you back and in turn holding the world back. Imagine what we would create with healed and reliable humans with whom to build. We can't outrun our pain. We may as well do the work of the healings that are necessary for us. So, do we really need celebrities? Do we really need statues of people? Um, that's just something I want to lay on you to think about. In terms of labor, unions aren't an extension of organized crime would be great to have. Um, we could change the culture of the mediocrity of work from one where alliances are built on covering up for each other's failures to producing excellent work. Excellence in any endeavor requires honor. There was a really great conversation about diversity from, I believe, the Kellogg Foundation that I'll share at the end of this because diversity is one of those areas that has been talked about for a long time, but there needs to be a new approach to diversity. Um, and then once again, there are many other conversations going on around labor, like pay equity, and I'm not going to echo them here, but there are quite a few. And then in terms of law, I toy with the idea that we only really need one law: no murder, state sanctioned or otherwise. Because There is soul murder, there's physical murder. And then there's reputational murder. And I'm not talking about reputational murder in the sense that someone is exposing someone who's a predator in the environment. I'm talking about reputational murder where the assertion is not true and the person's life is ruined because of an untrue rumor or assertion. Um, and I want to say that most criminality comes from people who feel dishonored, like the woman who was talking during the protest this summer, and there was a area that was destroyed, and she's, we don't care about Target, we care about the fact that we don't have access to this and this, and she used Monopoly as the object lesson in her rant. It was incredible, but she's saying that basically what Martin Luther King, I believe, said about how riots are the sound of the unheard or something like that. And then there are many reforms going on in law, um, but they just need to be implemented. Get back on the good foot of 21st century policing that the Obama administration had. I'm sure the Biden Harris administration will be taking that up. We also should get rid of private prisons and create more rehabilitation centers for people. And also, the legal system is only accessible to the rich. It's one of our former president's go to strategies. He always sought to exhaust people in one way or another, and then the nail in the coffin would always be using the legal system. He played all these hands for anyone who was paying attention to his administration. He played all these hands then. But I also want to say that they literally financially exhaust people. So either you're like me and could not pay one thin dime to fight a legal battle, or you're even a middle class person who have thousands of dollars and you still don't have the thousands of dollars it would take to combat all the legal wranglings that people typically carry on that abuse the power that they have in the legal system. The next area is a pretty large area because it's politics, what Dr. Fuller calls people relations. So this covers a whole wide range of things. And I've always appreciated, me personally, but also this person who I'm quoting, he says that he's always appreciated any personality that is truthful, transparent, and trustworthy. Um, I guess the former secretary of the German Security Office reflected this in a recent interview about international diplomacy. Intimate relationships take the same elements, in my experience, except in the case of distinguishing our worldviews, the assessment's done even closer to home, not necessarily just in our interactions with other people. We need to review and discover our worldview because that is what colors all of our interactions. It's the lens at which we see the world, and then the lens in which we see particular situations and people. There's a whole narcissistic system that has run amok, and we're all living through it and surviving it. It's pretty vicious. You may go through all the dynamics of narcissism and you can discover a lot of the manifestations of the toxicity of our society. Racism and narcissism are twins with different names. A lot of what we trip off of is the languaging of our silos, our technical language. But sooner or later, we'll get a universal translator working. Soon, I hope. Um, it makes sense that the number of black men who went for Trump did, because they're probably plugged into the residuals of the system that targets them, and then decided at whatever point, that they were going to either beat that system or join it. And I guess they chose to join it, reflecting the patriarchy, misogyny, and those other things. Toxic masculinity is an expression of narcissism as well. All of these things are practiced by the whole gender spectrum in a lot of different ways. This spare the rod and spoil a child thing is, it's not about beating your children. It's about guiding them as a shepherd uses a rod to guide the sheep that they herd. It's not really about beating your children into submission or controlling them in any way. But the Bible has a lot of guidance on raising children well, if you can find it. Then I ran across this post by my friend Cynthia. She said, "This morning I heard an interesting addition to a concept. We're all aware of the crabs in a bucket phenomenon. If you're not, it's basically that any crab can climb out of a bucket with some effort, but when there are more than one in a bucket, the one trying to get out with will continually be pulled down by the others. Just as it reaches almost freedom, the part I didn't know is how deep this goes." So, like, crabs getting to the top of the bucket and getting to freedom, and then the crabs in the bucket are pulling the crab back down. And then she goes on to say that if the crab continues to try to climb out, eventually the others will pull it down and start breaking its arms and legs. And if it refuses to give up, eventually the crabs will eventually kill it. And she said that's some deep doo doo. And that has been replicated in human behavior more times than I can think or would like to admit. Yeah, that is scary, isn't it? In what ways are we crabs with the people that are around us? Just a question. Just because you're woke today doesn't mean that you were always woke. But if you're compassionate, you'll understand that those who are not woke today can become woke if you're compassionate and you give them space and whatever it is you have to give towards their wokeness. Think about how you would want somebody to have handled you before you became woke. Let that guide. And then there's this concept that I've been sharing with people that I realized inside of the aftermath of we are cells in the body of God, that when people are in relationships, there's an nth person who needs to be honored. And what I mean by that is, like, when I'm engaging my daughter, there's me and there's my daughter. And when we're engaging, there's this nth person right here in the middle of the two of us. And that person needs to be honored. That person is made up of what I contribute and made up of what my daughter contributes to the very interaction we're having as mother and daughter, two women in the world, whatever the construct, two people struggling to get a workout done. Who knows their circumstances? But that nth person is there and needs to be honored. So that means I honor my daughter as my daughter. I honor her as a woman coming up in the world. I honor her in a lot of different ways. And then she would honor me in whatever ways that she sees me. And it really is about seeing the person and how you see them. That is exactly how you treat them. All inside of that worldview, all inside of those lenses that we see out of every day that we take for granted. Are you someone who wears glasses like I do? Are you someone who's ever had glasses on your face and you're looking around for your glasses? That's how invisible our worldview can be to us. I also want to say that we all have definitions of what relationships mean to us or what they are to us. It's incumbent upon us to communicate that, but with the realization that not everybody's going to hold the same definitions that we do. And so we need to have in depth conversations, experiences over time with people to get this data feedback loop going between us and other people. Because truth exists inside of that feedback loop. It doesn't exist anywhere else. And that feedback loop of truth exists inside of the the exchanges that we have with other people, and then what other people are sharing back with us. That truth exists inside that feedback loop. It doesn't really exist anywhere else. And it all depends on who you're in a feedback loop with. Because if you're in a feedback loop with a liar, there may not be a lot of truth available unless you're able to see past and calculate past and figure past the lies. All of that, those factors are what colors what is in that feedback loop. Now, one of the ways that we honor people is to stay present to who we're speaking to. That means that uh, there's a lot of different kinds of people you'll speak to, and you need to consider who they are. And one of the things that I was taught in my sojourn in Landmark is this being with exercise. It's where you literally sit in front of a person and you look at their face, at their eyes. I can't break it down for you now, but there's also a mirror work to do about that, where you can be with yourself in the mirror. You can try it being yourself in the mirror, with yourself in the mirror. Maybe since we're all at home in quarantine, you can try it with somebody that you live with. See what you get out of it. See if you're comfortable or uncomfortable. See what comes up. What are your thoughts while you're listening to your inner thoughts and just being with the person as well. And I want to say that we're all equal, but we're not equal in ability or expertise. And we need to recognize our lanes. Like, know what your area of expertise is, and don't try to um, lecture people about an area of expertise, especially if you reached out to them for that area of expertise. That seems kind of inane. That would be like me going to my professor and lecturing them about something that he or she is imparting to me. That's completely different than this experience I had in democratic theory, where we all were saying, hey, if all you need to do is define your citizenry and provide services to your citizenry, and that makes you a democracy, then South Africa's a democracy. There has to be something said about the egalitarian nature of that society. But I digress. I would also say that I would caution people against generalizing. And if you do, honor the truth in your generalizing. So, for example, I coached this woman recently about saying hateful things to white people that are exhibiting the ignorance that white people would exhibit, given that racism is a hidden system. And she is married to one and knows plenty of other white people who have shown their commitment to this work and have been quiet and done all the kind of listening and all that, but they just need to be encouraged and acknowledged. So when you're talking about white people like there are no white people that are committed to the liberation and the humanity, the full humanity of Black people, you're wiping a broad brush across a bunch of people who, a small group, a small percentage, but still a persistent one over generations. And then I also want to say that when people are coming up in life, those people around that person really needs to check them in integrity. Like, just keep them in a feedback loop of truth, to keep them grounded and to keep them integrous to who they are. Because a lot of people have forsaken their emotional and mental health for things and titles, and you're bleeding all over other people, but you don't recognize it because it's such a familiar way of being. And you're probably bleeding all over people, not in public because you like to save face there, but at home because that's private and abusive. And, nobody would think that, you know, there's two different existences going on, potentially, maybe more in some people's cases. And then I just hope we move away from these dynamics because it's all holding us back. Some in simplicity would reflect on this kind of behavior as hypocrisy, but I don't judge it like that. Some people just have blind spots, and some are just in an incongruency, like they're working it through, but we just don't know that they're working it through. They're really good people, but they just have like certain little practices that are questionable, and maybe they'll discover some things about themselves by inquiring into those questions versus avoiding them. Um, it's really only the practitioners of dishonor that really concern me, I imagine. Like I don't call all white people racist. I only call people who practice racism, like white supremacist organizations. I only call them racist. The rest of us are either targets of racism or benefiting from racism, but unaware that we're benefiting from racism. And both of us need to have some time to be accountable to, because as targets of racism, there's the ways that we survive that perpetuate the system. And then there's, for the beneficiaries of racism, there is the learning about the scaffolding of the system and the mechanisms of the system and why it perpetuates. So I will say that having titles and accomplishments is not maturity, even though it'll make people think that you're mature. It only shows your mastery of the corporate system, not the one that will give you inner peace, otherwise known as maturity. Seeking a fortune with a facade is a booby prize. Then the only thing you can provide another person is feedback, like that feedback loop. That's the only way that truth can really be gleaned. Otherwise, what people end up doing is they just have to draw their own conclusions. And a very wise person imparted to me that the lack of information leaves a lot of room for suspicion, something like that. And then our worldviews dictate our initial interpretations. We can be generous to the rest of society by honoring them with a conversation for understanding. To do less is selfish and not really a practice of good citizenship. You don't have to actually say that you can have a conversation. You can actually, when you're invited to a conversation, you can give a counter offer. You don't have to say yes or no. You can say, hey, I'm not available to the conversation now, but I will be available on this particular date. And you may call me or I will call you on that particular date. And then if you say yes and everything is agreed, then manage your word. If you aren't going to make the call, make sure that you let the person know out of honor of their time. Because that person, if they're in integrity themselves, they had made time and set aside time and provided time waiting to establish whether or not you would be showing up or not. And it's just like with an appointment. It's not moralistic integrity. It's just how you manage an agreement, like the no call, no show experience. But then there's the piece of having the conversation about the breakdown that is the no call, no show. And then people always assume that they're being made wrong. And some people actually do make people wrong about the no call, no show. But in reality, what you really can do is have a conversation about accountability and bringing everything back into integrity and back to truth and honor for both people or whoever all are involved, right? And that's what the kind of work that people have to be more willing to do. Now, if you're honoring another person's humanity, then there can't be this like constantly doing the same thing over and over again and constantly expecting forgiveness. I mean, that does wear thin even for the most spiritual of us. And then there's this thing about women hating on each other in competition with each other, which is dishonorable. although competition itself is not dishonorable. But it's so insidious in so many women's relationships. It's even fraught here in this area because there is such an imbalance between the number of women and the number of men that are dating or available to date. I've been the object of so much hate over the over years that I refuse to become accustomed to it. I'm going to be disappointed every single time I meet a woman and she scowls before even learning my name. And I just don't want to become good at overcoming that or overcoming like Jim Crow or James Crow Esquire, as we call it in the 2020s. Um, Here's another one. People who mess with my last name dishonor me. Um, it's usually you religious types. Like I literally recently got a letter that had my name on it, and where they got my name from, I literally, filled out my name in total, and they still gave me an envelope that has that on it. And the thing that's, distressing about it is now you're choosing between my parents because my mother's last name is one of them and my father's last name is the other of them, and I don't need to choose between them. And a lot of ethnicities outside of the US and inside the US have similar kinds of practices around names. So don't act like your keyboard doesn't have a dash key. Use it. Use the hyphen. It'll be okay for you. Like how about we just end the marriage property dynamics and let the ladies keep the name they were born with or whatever name they would like to have. It's hellish to do genealogy because of some of this missing matrilineal information. And then Blacks and Indigenous people are at the bottom of every single one of these areas that I talk about. And there's a lot of information about these dynamics that needs to be implemented. So, in the area of religion, there is just so much I could say about this. Um, so, let me address just some very fundamentals. The origin story of humanity starts with Black people. Black people closer to the original people had the ability to produce all kinds of people, all kinds of physical expressions because they're all human. Race is not real, but racism is. So we're all humans and our biological differences are few. But back at that time, there was this landmass called Pangea. And it's the result of the molten lava cooling and creating this crust on top that had water on the surface and land on the surface. And over time, it started to drift apart to represent the map we have today. When Pangea was Pangea, when there was just land that you could just traverse, there were three strands. Scientifically, they talk about this. There's three strands of DNA that went out from that area, now called Africa. It went out into what's known as Europe and that general vicinity, and then went west, what is now west, into, the Western Hemisphere. And then some remained in Africa. And the ones that went up into the areas where you would experience 7 months of, you know, cold weather, where you had to gather your food and hopefully that nothing happened to your storage of food, because if something happened to your storage of food, you'd have to find alternate sources of food, sometimes family members, hopefully rarely, but I don't know the full history about that. But it was kind of savage conditions compared to those who were somewhere still around the equator, living in environments where they're picking fruit off of trees and fishing for fish right out of the ocean or out of lakes. A different kind of disposition that it gives you as a person, a different kind of psychology, I'd imagine as well. And then I I know that there's many lies about the creation story in the Bible because of patriarchy, because of the nature and the heart of the people who pulled together the King James Version of the Bible at the Council of Nicaea. So if you reflect, many of you who've been involved with the church, in Genesis, it talks about Adam. And that Adam in Genesis is an Adam that is representative of all humanity, not a male. And then there was an operation that we're all familiar with the story of that. And in that operation, some people who have done, I think it's called eschatology, of, looking the study of words that are in the Bible, but just words in general, entomology. Anyway, um, they looked at the study of those words and realized that it wasn't like the rib was taking out and poof, God made a woman out of a rib. It was actually, they were like separated, sort of like the cells are. When cells are reproducing, they separate. It's the same thing that happened to that being called Adam. And then if you look through the Strong's dictionary, just if you look up Adam and see how the meaning of Adam changes throughout the life of the Bible, you will follow rightly the development of humanity in that same way. So I know that there was also a time that came called the curse. Why do we not consider what life might have been like before that curse? Why do we seem to spend most time in our life trying to perfect battling the curse when we could actually perfect returning not necessarily to the Garden of Eden, but to the condition of Eden? I mean, maybe even really evil doesn't really have to exist as a crutch. Maybe we don't need it as a moderating factor to our behavior. Maybe we can disappear that too. Just some things to consider. And then some lies that we've been told. We'll be having this episode on Sunday called Recovering from the Lies That the Church Told Us. We'll be addressing a whole bunch of things, but some of the things we'll be addressing is egalitarianism and mutuality versus patriarchy. Why you can call yourself a believer and use the Bible for white supremacy like the KKK do, the lie of white supremacy. How we've been taught that holy means purity or something in that vein, when purity actually doesn't even exist as a concept in the Bible. Look it up. And then holy actually means whole. Like there's having a pure heart, but as a person being pure is not a concept. So it's about being whole and being healed. That's what holy means, whole. And then WHOLE, just for those who did not know. And then the Bible encourages us to be a walking epistle. Don't shove the word down people's throats. Be the word so people can see it in action. Try that. Live your life in it. Don't build a building. You know, Jesus didn't come and build a building and say, hey, let's keep up this, building fund and all these other things. No, Jesus came and wanted us to live the gospel that he taught. So we need to be a walking epistle. And then because we walk and live in duality, we need the law as well as we need the spirit. So we need to understand the inspiration outside of ourselves. And then we also need to have the animation of the spirit that dwells within us and informs our lives. Now, also with regard to religion, there's this economic exploitation economy that exists in religion and in communities in which big churches operate. I'll leave that one alone because I think there's been a lot said about that. So let's cut out the exploitation economy, please. And then the way that it's commonly practiced here, it is an opiate to the masses where people only seem to aspire to be pulpit parrots and fans of the pastor instead of becoming Bereans and really inspired themselves reading the word and studying the word themselves. Instead, I seem to see a lot of people taking the lazy and counterfeit paths, just to try to front and prop like we have achieved something that we haven't. I mean, you're entitled to do whatever you want and live life whichever way you want, but I hope that many wake up from this dynamic as well. See, because God's design does not need any propping up. Only lies need scaffolding. The truth just is. Just is. Doesn't need any help. Now, the next section that we're going to talk about is sex. There's so much that I could say about this. I could just do a whole video just on honor and this alone. And sex is just one of those things where we've been taught so many puritanical things about sex and ways that porn is done that dishonors the beautiful gift that sex is, and the cheating that goes on that, people can't even communicate in a reasonable manner about sex. Um, and I just want to say that any women who are engaging in any version of the oldest profession that objectifies you and rewards you for one dimension of your humanity is dishonoring. I don't hate the player. I do very much hate this game, though. I would smile deep on the day that the dishonoring of women is over. And I just want to say out loud that marital rape, yes, it's a thing that exists. And I'm praying for those of you who are living through this. The inability to communicate with your partner about the journeys you want to take in your sexual life with them is dishonoring. Sometimes you can't have those conversations because of residual issues, and then sometimes you can't have those conversations because you're in an oppressive relationship. I hope you're not in an oppressive relationship. And then finally, about sex, I want to say, even though there's way more topics, any exploitation or abuse that causes something as beautiful as sex and ruins it, causes something as beautiful as sex and ruins it for someone at such a deep level that it takes years of healing to enjoy it again, is dishonor. Now, there is one last area that Dr. Fuller talked about. There's another one that I added because I didn't see it in Dr. Fuller's um, outline, but war and counter war, otherwise known as peace. Now, Dr. Fuller has this whole idea about peace and why, unless racism doesn't exist, peace is not attainable. I'm just going to stick to this conversation for now about hope and war and counter war in that regard. So I just want to say that don't become what you've gone through. It's a mediocre default result that's expected. Fight for who you are at your core. Fight for your personal convictions to be manifested. Fight for the rubber to meet the road of your vision that you've been given for life. Don't do the mediocre when you can be excellent. We have too many that are already doing the mediocre. Ijeoma Olowu has written a book about mediocre because there is an origin of mediocre and hiding mediocrity. And then enough has commonly been said about this, but I'll add the following. When people want to fight with me because I'm nonviolent, I'm not interested. I'm always going to do what I can to de escalate the conversation and the situation. if the person that I'm engaging allows for that. I've discovered that in my honorable personage, I have endeavored to prevent others from choosing for me. I don't let others change the integrity of who I want to be and the ethics in which I dwell. Um, I've discovered that in that, racism is a huge problem that has a structure in every area of our lives, and until it's eradicated, it will continue to be a cancer to democracy. Period. Period. So, and racism wants to choose for us a different path. But I love The Art of War because I actually read it and learned how to wage peace by reading The Art of War. And it's a very great strategy book anyway. And then, many have tried to choose war for me, but I decline. And then some think of me as insecure or some kind of a punk or something because I really don't react carnally to things that people think I should or go chasing the bag like some people do. You know, the word I live and adhere to cautions me against gaining the world and losing my soul. Have you lost your soul? Have you lost track of what honor is? Because some would rather put on a facade of success with no vulnerability and little humanity achieved. I know you're averse to my humanity, a lot of you, because you've taken on a lie of what it means to be an adult and accomplished. It's okay. A lot have, but it doesn't change the delusion of it. My soul was murdered, and I was honoring the time and all it took for God to restore it. And I'm glad I took the time. I wish I could have been achieving at the same time, but I was busy honoring being a true single parent. And, to my daughter, thank you so much for always being in a feedback loop of truth with me, even when I didn't see it. Thank you for always just calling me higher as your mama. You rock, woman, and I'm very proud of the person that you are. So, from the day that I dropped those dirty clothes into the hamper in 1982 or 83 to November 6th, 2020, I was recovering from scoring a 10 on the ACEs test. The ACEs test is a adverse childhood experiences test where people answer questions regarding things that happened to them between before they were turned 18. I answered yes to all of those, and some of those things happened to me multiple times before I was 18. And after scoring that, it validated the tough work that I had to traverse. And I know through that process, because I had adhered to a particular value system, I endeavored to live my personal convictions. I think that my power increased, that my power that came from God increased, that I've been animated by that power and inspired by things akin to that relationship. And I have to say, I slayed the last dragon that usually reliably disturbed my peace. Literally had me terrified at one point. And I'm so free from that. And it's just so wonderful to experience the freedom of that. I'm not really a flesh eater. And I know people read that in the Bible and they think it means to be a vegetarian or something. But maybe a flesh eater is somebody who doesn't eat the flesh of the people around them. They actually encourage the people around them, that they don't withhold praise from the people around them. So that praise that you share with the person inspires them to go even higher, to achieve more. And then I think that war is a flesh fest. It's a whole bunch of measuring and, you know, and proving, and I just think that it's a flesh fest. So I choose to wage peace, just something that is more akin to the spirit. And then I don't know where environment would fit into all the areas that I was talking about, but I've observed that dishonor is the cause of the condition of the environment as well. The deforestation, the plastic in the oceans, the insidious litter that I see so many places that just get blown into the streams. So, like, I have this idea that maybe we lived on Mars in another time, because, 4.6 billion years, that's a long time. And those of you who are believers, the Bible said that 1 year is like 1,000 years to God, and do the math. But for, like however many billions of years that they say that this planet has existed, and then, they say that Mars had some, similar kind of environment as this planet, but somehow there's something that happened there. Maybe we are what happened there. Maybe we went back and forth between Earth and Mars, and we're just going to terraform Mars again and then leave people here to die on Earth, after we destroy the environment out of our neglect and our dishonor of it. I hope we can turn things around miraculously. I saw what happened during quarantine for the couple of months that the earth got to breathe without our insidious pounding on it. So who knows? We'll see. Um, I just love that, and I think that this poor environment has all the scars of manifest destiny on it, and that we should do our best as stewards of that environment to to increase the viability of the forests and the ecosystem of our environment, to replace it if we can, plant some trees and such. The pressures of our I, me, my society pushes us further and further away from our humanity, because we're so accustomed to being with the more challenging, so unaccustomed to being with the more challenging side of our humanity. All the ways we are vulnerable and insecure, we miss the opportunity to experience our achievements fully healed and expressed. Imagine if we allowed ourselves to heal. Imagine that we allowed ourselves to feel the full range of our emotions. Our emotions are just indicators. They're not something to be afraid of. Like, if I'm happy about something, I'm informed that that something is pleasing to me. If I'm sad about something, that informs my choices. But I don't have to build a monument to it, and I don't need to avoid it and gunny sack all those feelings that they explode, without any warning of trigger. But as we get to know ourselves and we do that know thyself journey, that we give ourselves an opportunity to live more honor and less dishonor. So instead of doing the healed and fully expressed, we opt for the comfortable and familiar straight-jacketed habits we've developed while surviving life versus thriving in it. Living dishonor causes people to live in the shadows, and we're meant to live in the light, and we're meant to be the light. We need to stop feeding fear and those things that set itself up against honor. We really could create a society of honor. We agreed to this mess that we're dying in, living, but not really realizing that we're producing death. We can consciously create systems of honor. Like too many ideas we grasp, we don't seem to reason them out and see the possibilities available to us, like us returning to our humanity, which enables us to treat others and in a humane way. Imagine a world where we could produce human beings who would display characteristics like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, because They are a natural byproduct of who they are. Instead of stopping before we meet our end, like taking a hike in an unfamiliar place, we'll come across a bench maybe that looks inviting because we've been walking, and then we decide to just take a rest there. And then we stand up and we then decide to go back the way we came instead of maybe taking another path that might show us a beautiful vista or maybe some waterfalls. But we never will know that because we not taking that other path is sort of like the ways that we shut down, that we don't engage. Now, the other thing I want to share is that we're also only as sick as our secrets. If we live in a world where secret keeping is close to our identity, this closeted behavior is going to hurt us all. And it's already been hurting us as a country, it's hurting us as individuals. And it's also hurting some people biologically because they don't know their medical history, their family medical history. And that's why some people are using the genealogy for medical information that they don't have. But I also want to say that the LGBTQI spectrum of community has its own challenges, but it's not the hate that the church has taught us. It has more to do with trying to thrive in a system that requires closeted behavior to have peace until one can no longer fit in that closet. Can we just honor the myriad of human expression without trying to control existences that don't threaten anybody's life? And please don't make up that the way someone else lives threatens your life because that's not real, that's not true. Just recognize your lane and honor it while honoring your fellow human beings. It's important to distinguish prophets from profits. ROFETS from PROFITS. You will either have one or the other in this world. It's rare that you have both in one person. And I would invite you to look for the little box that's holding your life back, that you keep trying to fit in, that you keep trying to fly under the radar to avoid your nemesis. The origin of my little box was a sibling rivalry that was born of a narcissistic family system. So, sibling rivalry is competition, and competition is useless. It's a booby prize because each human's unique and we all have our own giftings. And we specifically have different fingerprints, ear prints, and lip prints, along with some other differences. And they're so unique as we are, even among twins. And we all have a purpose and gifts, and our educational system and our upbringing can either foster it or damage it. Yet we constantly look outside of ourselves for validation versus an internal feeling of peace and wellness. Our existence is a duality. So I imagine it makes sense to take care of and attend to both the spiritual and physical concerns. In the same way, we reflect inwardly and outwardly at the same time to achieve and maintain balance. As I've shared with some friends before, riding a bicycle on this planet requires maintaining balance, and so does life. In this video, what I've learned about competition, recorded during a religious fundamentalist season of my life, I discussed the lessons I learned while running track and other sports in which I competed. And I realized that those lessons that I learned amount to honor. When one's identity is built on a false history of achievement, built on the backs of others, everything else we know tends to be fraught with falsehoods as well. It is usual for human beings not to want to flaunt their failures, but as failures correlate to eventual success, we should throw celebrations for our failures because They put us closer to success. It's sort of like what Madiba said. Nelson Mandela said, I don't lose, I either win or I learn. And I agree. That's the only thing a loss is meant for. It's a lesson. Covering up failure out of pride robs a person of the lessons and how they may improve in a way that will open other doors of success. Don't create a dam in your life. Keep the river flowing. Tackling these issues will begin to take sticks out of your stream and allow things to flow smoothly because walking in truth is the ultimate tool of competition and it is the path to enlightenment, that feedback loop of truth. So, what is the fruit of your life? What is the fruit of your life looking like? Does it look like a child of honor or does it look like a child of dishonor? Is it mostly honor or is it here and there a few times of dishonor? And how do you handle that? I think that it's important for people to increase their critical thinking skills. It will give us an opportunity to be more nuanced in our approaches to conversations and ideas. I think it's important for us to fund mental health care so every area of human activity and every level of society has access. The worst thing we ever did, and we're sitting right in the results of it now, is clearing and cutting the mental health funding from the federal government back in the 80s. And it took about 20 years for us to get to where we are now, where people are gaslit, traumatized, and wanting for coping mechanisms. So let's honor one another and our creation and the freedom that we have by dismantling this system of dishonor that we've built and all the little children of that system of dishonor, like racism and sexism and body shaming and all kinds of different things that are like a cancer to the body of God that we are the cells of. We are the cells in the body of God. Let's like attack those other cells and make them healthy cells if we can. So, in case you're wondering who's been speaking to you, once again, I encourage you and invite you to check out nadinebenrussell.net, and the About page will give you a lot of information about my background. And I just want to say thanks for listening. I look forward to when you're listening again, and I'm looking forward to your feedback on this video. Thanks so much. I love you. Hang loose and live the best life that you can with the wisdom that you have. Have a great night. And again, thanks for listening.